one of your many fascinating surveys is on fetishes. You wrote a blog post about it. Probably several because it's like a huge data set.
Still in progress. Yeah.
So the one I'm referring to is on popularity and tabooness of various fetishes. So what are some interesting takeaways? I got to pull up this graph because it's freaking epic.
Yes, this is a big graph, and it has tabooness as one axis and popularity as the other.
Okay, for people who are just listening, on the x-axis is tabooness.
Yeah.
Asked to rate how taboo society viewed the sexual interest. And on the y-axis is percent of people reporting interest, log scale. Oh boy. All right. So just some examples on the low tabooness and high popularity. There's a correlation here. I think you said it's 0.69.
Yeah.
It's just hilarious. Is it still 0.69? Are you tracking that?
I haven't
that was the
looked
most recent,
since I did this. Yeah.
So like the less taboo stuff is more likely to be popular, and the more taboo stuff is less likely to be popular. And on the like missionary position, fingering, vagina, blowjobs, light spanking, cuddling is more taboo than missionary.
I think people are conceiving, like, if you're like, I'm really sexually aroused by cuddling specifically,
Sure.
then you're like, that's a little more weird than getting specifically aroused by blowjobs. You expect people to be aroused by blowjobs.
So this was like getting at like as a fetish versus like an activity.
Yeah, as a specific, like a concrete sexual interest. Like, I'm specifically interested in this thing. Yeah.
And so those are thighs and lips, different body parts, jaw lines. And then some of it is color based on more female preference versus male preference. Like jaw lines is more female preference. Being submissive is more female preference. Light bondage, more female. There's a lot of interesting ones. There's so much. Okay. But then on the far side of that, I mean, it gets pretty dark. But even all along the way, like extreme bondage being at 50 tabooness, pegging, pain, giving pain, sexual frustration, I suppose, right, as a kink.
Yeah.
And there's so many interesting ones, like to me, like just that I haven't even like considered.
Yeah. I had to do so much research into fetishes to compile the list.
Are there some surprising like options to you that you're like, oh, okay, this is like a fetish?
Yeah. Well, more confusing was like what the fetishes are about. Because like I didn't want to overlap fetishes, so I had to kind of look into them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's like such interesting manifestations of core drives. Like if you're really aroused by disgust, like maybe you're very into rolling around in dirt, but you're not into rolling around with ice cream. So I'm like, okay, I have to make those into two separate fetishes, you know?
Sure. And like I'm seeing like at the far end, rodents, like different types of incest, branding. So there's like pain, and then
it's like wound fucking.
Sex with animals, I guess, dogs, horses. Receiving oral sex from an animal is high tabooness and pretty high popularity.
Surprisingly high popularity. I was really shocked by that one. I went and triple check that number because I'm like, no way this amount of people are reporting interest.
Do you know which animal? Is there?
No, I didn't specify. I asked like which animals are erotic, and then I separately asked like how erotic is it to receive oral sex from your preferred animal.
This is so fascinating. So I would like, can we just talk about the methodology of this? This feels like deeply honest map of humanity in a way we don't usually map humanity.
Yeah.
Like, because it's so like your fetishes are so meaningful to each individual person.
Yeah, that's what I love about this work. It's like nobody cares about someone's fetishes. You never get to express them. And if you have a more unusual fetish, people usually judge you. Yeah. So it's like this tiny little pocket of like this shame thing, but it's so cool to me that like human brains could be oriented in such a way to like wound fucking. Like somebody finds that so erotic, and that's so cool.
Yeah. And then they probably, and it should be explored, like, how did that come to be? You mentioned that we like to construct narratives that somehow is grounded in childhood, but maybe it's genetic. Maybe it has to do with, maybe you can actually form and unform that fetish very quickly. I don't know.
This is one of the things that I'm researching. So in the big survey that I'm doing, I asked so many questions about childhood. All the ones that I think like we have common theories about, like, oh, are you abused? Is it yelled at by a man or a woman? Stuff like that. Like, was it really sexually repressive? Was it gender roles where you've expected to conform? A whole bunch of stuff. And then I asked, obviously about like a massive amount of fetishes. And my sample size right now is 500,000 people.
500,000.
Yeah, it's massive.
People.
And I have data for all of it. And the result looks like that's not really correlated. Nothing that I asked about in childhood, nothing correlates with fetish preference later in life. It does correlate with onset. Lots of things that happen in childhood can change like the age at which it triggers.
They have so many fascinating blog posts. You had a blog post, I think, on the age of fetish onset.
Yeah.
And like you really nicely organized it by age, like reproduction as a fetish, I guess pregnancy.
Yeah.
As at age of 17, about 16.9. Toys and like anal beads is 15.5.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I found, I mean, this data set is so huge, it's taking me a long time to go through it. So this is like snippets from what I remember when I was glancing through the data. So this part is not rigorous, but I seem to get the impression that if a fetish occurs for you earlier, like if you have much earlier onset, you're more likely to report being extremely interested into it. So later onset means you're going to be like less into the fetish. But if it hits earlier, it's like,
but I wonder if it
passionate.
Passes, like, is there like
I didn't
phases?
Measure old fetishes at all.
Like no longer, right? You used to, but it is no longer there. Interesting.
One interesting thing that I don't understand is that non-cis people seem to have more correlation between childhood experiences and fetishes. So I was saying that there's no correlation between childhood experiences and fetishes. This holds for cis people. But trans people, especially trans men, there's a correlation. It doesn't mean they have absolutely higher rates of abuse or fetishes or anything. But I'm just saying that, like, for them, there does actually seem to be some sort of connection between childhood experiences and sexuality later in life. And I don't understand why this applies to one group but not the other. I don't have a good theory for that.
So usually you try, like when you see something like that, you'll try to construct a theory and see if you can find, like, you keep that theory in mind, like a hypothesis of why it would be, and then you ask further questions to try to elaborate. Yeah. So can you maybe talk about the methodology of how you got the 500,000? Like what, like how did this come to be?
I might go into way too much detail about this because I thought about this so much.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, the question is, how do you get a lot of people to take a big survey? Yeah. The longer the survey is, the lower the response rate. And I really wanted to do one big comprehensive survey so I could like check a whole bunch of correlations within it. Because it's more annoying and it's harder to get a lot of people to retake similar surveys to each other at a time. So I'm like, okay, I need to convince a very large number of people to take a lot of these questions. And even building the questions, that was really hard because I'm like, okay, I need a comprehensive amount of fetishes. I can't ask everybody to answer for every single niche fetish. So I'm like, do you like ball gags? Do you like funnel gags? Do you like wife shrew gags or whatever? I'm like, you can't do that. Nobody's going to finish that survey.
Okay, fine. I'm not gonna ask questions. What's a wife shrew? But okay.
I'm not doing I'm trying to refer to like there's like a thing that like
different types of gags. Different types. Okay.
Different. So I'm like, so what I need to do is I need to ask people a question like, are you in like bondage? And if you say yes, then I'll go ask you all the bondage questions.
Got it.
Right. But then this seems simple, but then it's just exploded because I'm like, how do I categorize these fetishes? There's like, if you're into splashing, which is
what's that?
Like you like sitting in cakes, you like getting in mud, but basically like kind of messy sensory. Yeah. Like, is this a disgust thing? Is it a humiliation thing? Is it a sensory thing? Like, which category? Anyway, so it took me like 2 months of just agonizing over each fetish because you don't want to miss a fetish. You don't want to like have a really important thing that you accidentally put in the disgust category when it actually belongs in the humiliation category, you know?
Well, let me think about that because like you're still catching it. You're just categorizing it.
Right, because if you're into splashing and you're like, this is clearly a humiliation thing. So you say, yes, I'm into humiliation stuff. And then I don't ask you about splashing, then I'm missing a whole data set of people because I've falsely categorized a question.
You're going to miss stuff. You're just picking what's less and less important to miss.
Well, I'm trying to get people into the right question set.
Sure.
Because like, I can't ask you all the questions. I have to ask you a couple overarching questions to know what specific questions to ask you. And so those overarching questions have to be really, really well calibrated so that I can accurately feed you into the right sub part of the survey.
Awesome.
And so that was extremely difficult when I'm dealing with, I think it was like 850 fetishes. So I did a couple things to spot check. I did a couple questions where I asked detailed in the survey, but like also the beginning of the survey, just to see like what percentage of people I was capturing. And then I scored the survey. So if you take it, I had other people answer preliminary surveys where they gave me data about how taboo the various fetishes were, and then I used that data so that when you fill out the survey, it's extremely comprehensive, and you get data about exactly how taboo your interests are, and then you get a score at the end. And I give you an equivalent kinky character, which I also had people rate a whole bunch of fictional characters and some historic ones about like how kinky they were. So then I matched the historic character, kinky character, to your score.
So that makes it like more fun, like gamifies it a little bit, and you can brag about like how.
So people would share it with others.
Share it.
And a lot of the characters were really goofy, like there's SpongeBob and like Hitler's on there, and South Park characters.
What kink does Hitler have?
I think he's around Marilyn Monroe, which is like slightly above average kinkiness.
Oh, sorry. I thought there was like a 2-dimensional space somehow. So this is like literally from 0 to...
Just how kinky, yeah.
So Hitler's about as a millionaire. Who is the most... What's the character for
Willy Wonka?
Is the most kinky.
Was the most kinky, yeah.
Okay.
And I think like maybe Captain America was the least kinky or something. Or Gandhi.
Meanwhile, but that's another conversation. Oh boy.
Yeah, so it went viral on TikTok, basically, because people were like, what? I got this insane character. And then the sample size exploded from 40,000 to 500,000.
Wow. So, like, all it took is that kind of incentive? Mm-hmm. Or did you, like, at first have to pay people for the survey? No,
it was just that incentive.
And what about the demographic of the different people that took it?
Mostly younger. So, usually early 20s, predominantly female, like 70% female.
70% female.
Pretty I wraps out on TikTok demographics pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got it. But that's interesting. But young people are probably better for this kind of survey because there's probably a culture that's a little bit more honest about their sexuality.
Yeah, most likely. I think people are incentivized to be honest when they're getting a true identity response out of it. Like,
sure.
If you're doing it for money, you don't care. But like, if you are invested in the result, you want to know what the truth of the answers are, then you actually...
But it's possible that you also don't want to know the truth.
Yeah, this is true.
But on average, hopefully that doesn't... I mean, these are really difficult. Like, what is there some interesting little quirks that people should know about your methodology that you had to kind of solve to try to get to a really good survey? So one that you said is the categorization to make it more efficient. Is there some for the analysis part? Yeah.
So the graph that you were talking about is it's a binary. So it's like if somebody expressed even a little bit of interest, then it goes into the graph. So it's like 80% of people expressed even a little bit of interest. So it's not representing degree of interest. It's not differentiating between them at all. So it's possible that like some fetishes have exactly the same amount of people like are at least a little bit into them, but one of them it's very extreme interest and the other's like vague and not very intense. So that's not reflected. I also like probably didn't represent the visual part right. Like might not be intuitive, but
so you chose a log scale, but it was kind of spreads things out to makes it more clear.
Because the linear it was just so clustered at the bottom, you couldn't really separate it out. So there's obviously like selection effects. It's possible that like the identity result at the end impacted people's results a little bit. But the thing is, like, I'm comparing it to what exists. Like, what is the alternative? Yeah. And right now, the research on this stuff is terrible. So it's like, I'm not saying my research is perfect, but it's like, at least it's something. Like, it's something that's pointing us maybe in a direction that we might be able to do more research on.
And you're making the data available.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing it slowly because I ask about so many questions. It's like not very anonymized. Yeah. So I'm releasing the small sections of the data at a time.
Yeah. Have you published in like journals and stuff?
No, I haven't.
Do you have any interest in that, or is your approach?
I'm like I'm conflicted about it. Like it sounds cool because then I could be like, I'm published in a journal, and then people who are yelling about me who don't know anything about statistics on Twitter, like then I can go like shove it in their face.
But then you're also giving in to that silly criticism, right?
In. Like I feel so passionate about extra science, like science that you can just do. Like I want to make science accessible. Like anybody can just go look and learn about the basics of like doing a survey or figuring out how to interpret information. And doing a published journal feels like I'm betraying my cause a little bit.
That's often behind a paywall. Yeah, it goes against the. I mean, I think you not publishing in a journal is doing a big public service.
Aw. I think it's the first time I've heard that. Thank you.
Well, like just coming from like on this topic,
Mm.
the elitism I see on the psychology side with the journals and the academia, the positions and the institutions you come from, all of that, that goes against. I think that's more useful for math and computer science and so on, where there's like clear, like,
Mm.
but even then, code is code, data is data.
Yeah.
Like, prestige shouldn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Maybe for like biological experiments, like virology or something like that. It's good to be from a major lab that has a reputation for like going through all the procedures, like you can trust.
Mhm.
But here, like you're dealing with a giant mess of humanity. Like it's beautiful to be transparent, to be raw, to be exploring it together with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to
I
see.
think people like have a lot of incentive to doubt the results. Like a lot of the research I'm doing is to like cis and trans people. Like we don't have any data about transsexuality. Like not very good at least. And I'm really curious. I don't really have an agenda about it. I think
Mhm.
like being trans is like, cool. If you want to be trans, do it. And like I have some skepticism about like gender theory,
Mhm.
but like it doesn't come down to impact like the way I think trans people should be treated, which I think is like treat them, be fucking nice and human about it. I don't know. But when I'm talking about the thing, like my conclusions are that like transsexuality is really unique. It's not like like cis or cis women or man sexuality at all. And to me, this is super cool. But like a lot of people, this is very politicized right now. Like the data into like transsexual preferences, like it's so loaded, which is really sad because I am very accepting of weird sexuality. Like if you're into a weird thing, I'm like, good for you. This is super cool. Like let's figure out how to make it so that you can explore the thing you're into without any stigma. But because there's so much stigma that like if you find that one demographic is into weirder sex stuff than the other, like it's hard to present that in a way that people don't weaponize. So it's been really politically touchy subject here.
Yeah, but you do it in a way that's not does it's not feel like it has an agenda, right? You're just exploring.
Yeah. I feel pretty open to what I'm going to find. Like I often have no idea what the data is going to tell me. And I'm like, I pre-commit like, okay, I could say A, B, or C. And I'm like down to publish any of those findings.